Good evening, and welcome to Thursday Therapy with the Counseling Couple. I am Seneca Bean,
And I am Carlos Bing.
and we are so happy that you are here with us this evening. So, look, it is December, and we know December is a month of joy, but it can also have some stress in there when you are thinking about finances and spreading all this holiday cheer, and when you are moving into the next year. So, tonight we are going to talk about tips to relieve financial stress. We have a great panel of experts, we'd like to call, of people that are our church members who will be joining us and just share some tips on some really relevant tips on ways that you can relieve some financial stress. So, before we do that, of course, we always like to share a little story. And then we always anchor our conversations with a video that will help us to think about the topic and then be able to, again, hear from our panelists. We also want to give you the opportunity, if you have any questions as we are going along, you can always feel free to put those in the chat and we'll be able to see those as we are moving through this evening. So, Carlos, what is your story?
I have a story, and it's not really related to the holidays per se, but more about budgeting. And it really relates to when Seneca and I got married
Oh,
several years ago, 16 years ago. And so when we initially got married, we decided that we were going to put all of our money from work and all of our earnings in one account. And I remember it's probably about a month in, because I'm such a stickler on looking up stuff and just checking accounts. I had began noticing that my wife was going to visit Starbucks quite often. And so one, I don't drink Starbucks, I don't drink coffee. Um, and I noticed this was happening every day. And so
it's not quite
it
every
was
day.
like every day. Like it was a stop every day for like $10. And so I was like, okay, so babe, so what's going on here? And so we had this conversation and she was like, well, I'm going to Starbucks. This is what I do. And I'm like, well, this is our account. She said, well, that's my money. I said, no, it's our money. And we agreed to that. But we agreed that it was our money. But she also said, I don't want to be monitored that way on my own expenses. And so we decided at that point
Mhm.
that we would put monies for our bills in a joint account and have been our own separate monies so she can go do her Starbucks thing and I could do my thing. But that's what we had to agree to through conversation. And it's just funny because I remember that when we got together and talked about that initially, it got kind of heated. And we had to figure out how to deal with that situation that we thought was going to be very easy to navigate, but kind of wasn't. What are your reflections of that conversation?
Well, what I remember is just that, honestly, we had to have a real conversation about what he likes and what I like. And because I am a coffee drinker, I do enjoy my Starbucks now occasionally because I've gotten smarter over the years.
Mm.
However, I definitely at that point did like it all the time. And so, again, what works for us, that worked for us. And we decided that that was how we wanted to um, have our accounts. But that doesn't always work for everybody, right? And so you have to figure out through conversation, through communication, and all of that, what works for you and what works for your family. And so that is a little story we had to start this conversation off. But now we'll hear from, or we'll watch a video from another couple that really talks about 6 steps to resolve financial conflicts in marriage, because we also know that money can cause a lot of issues, not just in marriage, right? These tips are also for single people. So don't feel that if you're watching, this is only if you are married. These tips can be taken away. You find little nuggets in any conversations that you're having. So hopefully you're listening in and are able to take something from the video. So Mike, we'll go ahead and watch the video, please.
We're going to talk about 6 steps to resolve financial conflicts in marriage. Coming up.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to an all-new edition of the Sunday Night Sit-Down with America's #1 money couple. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Ty, and we're from hisandhermoney.com, where we're managing money, marriage, and everything in between.
The Sunday Night Sit-Down is being brought to you by Audible. Audible.com is a great resource to get audiobooks for those who have less than ideal time available to get reading in. We all know that reading is fundamental and it's a habit of millionaires and billionaires worldwide. So if you're striving to be one of them, you're going to have to start reading, and Audible is a great way for you to do that. You can get a free trial and a free ebook by going to hisandhermoney.com/audible. And of course, we'll have the link down below in the description box. We're glad that you guys are back here for another great edition of the Sunday Night Sit Down. And we're going to be dealing with a tough topic for a lot of people. But it's a real topic, a real thing that's manifested in a lot of people's marriages right now. And that's conflicts around money inside of a marriage. We know that oftentimes this is a thorn in a lot of marriages' sides. I mean, the research is out there that money is one of the #1 reasons that marriages fall apart. And a lot of times it's because of financial conflicts that go unresolved. And we want to help with that area. We've had conflicts around money in our marriage, and we've worked through them, and we've gotten to the other side, and we want you to do the same as well. So if you're facing a conflict about money in your marriage, we want you to take these 6 steps to solve it right away. The first step in this process is to lay all your cards on the table. That means you've got to be transparent. Have you been hiding money? Have you been hiding your debt? Have you not been honest with the amount of money that you've been spending? Are you keeping things from your spouse? It's time to end it, and it's time to come clean. I know that that's painful for a lot of you all to hear, but trust when we tell you. This is the first step, because without this step, you'll never get true, real healing in this area. If you try to overstep this one, you'll only have a partial manifestation of healing, and chances are you'll end up going around the same mountain that you're going around now. So take the time, take a deep breath. If you got to write it down, or if you're a verbal communicator, do whatever you got to do to lay all your cards on the table so you can start the healing process.
The second step that you must take is that of maintaining mutual respect for one another. That is so important. So no name calling, no one person doing all of the work and the other not doing anything. In the beginning of our marriage, we learned this the hard way. We thought that it was brilliant for me to be the one to put together the budget and to implement the budget, because I was a better one with money, while my husband just sat on the sidelines. But we started to have some resentment built up between us, some unspoken frustration. He felt like a child handed money, and I felt like a person, a wife that was being taken for granted, because here it is, I was trying to better our life and better our future financially. So you want to make sure that you maintain mutual respect. Both of you get involved. Talk about it. Say, are you okay with me doing this? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Start the conversations.
And it doesn't matter which one of you was the quote-unquote problem. The point is, you both deserve respect, and you both should take time and opportunities to give it to each other. That's the only way that healing can come, is if you both maintain that respect. Now, the third step is important. You need to find the root cause of the problem. A lot of times we only deal with the symptoms, and we try to address the symptoms and not the root. And because we only address the symptoms, other symptoms manifest because we didn't deal with the root. So why do they overspend? Why did they think it was okay to hide this from you? What was the root of that? Is there some rejection that they're dealing with in their youth? Did they come up in not so good economic situation and they have this fear of returning back to that state? What is the root cause of this trouble? That's what you need to figure out. And that goes back to that transparency piece in step 1. You need to find the root and deal with the root. Address the fear. Address the objection. Find the true root of the behavior, and then you'll start to see a real change.
The next step that you want to take is to make sure that you establish good lines of communication. This is extremely important. So why don't you guys choose a day every single week or once a month where you discuss financial things. So you can say, hey, let's meet every Thursday at 7 o'clock around the dinner table after we put the kids to bed, and let's talk about our finances, okay? Or you may say every 30th of the month or every 5th of the month. Whatever it is, you come up with it, but you want to make sure that you all are communicating. Yeah. That is very important. When you don't communicate, that is still communication in the wrong way, the wrong direction.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you establish safe lines of communicating. So you want to make sure that you create a safe zone, a place where you both can come together. There will be no judgment of past or current failures, and you just want each spouse to feel comfortable in opening up their communication.
And because you open the lines of communication, that leads you into our next step, which is to create a plan of attack to move forward. And this is something that you have to do together. And this is something you can only do if you followed the previous steps in order. This is the place where you guys strategize. Listen, we've laid everything out on the table. We've been respectful. We've communicated well. Now let's map this out, okay? This is, the past is what it was. Now what can we do today to make our tomorrow better? Whether that's coming up with a plan to pay off debt, whether that's coming up with a plan to seek some counseling, maybe about us hiding things or dealing with things from our past that is causing us to have these issues with finances, whatever it takes to move forward, this is the place where you guys come together and sensibly think of a plan, a strategy to move yourselves forward financially.
The last step is that you want to make sure that you hold each other accountable. That's right. You are your spouse's accountability partner. So therefore, once you guys lay everything out on the table, you have the open lines of communication, you say, okay, this is what we are going to do, this is what we're not going to do, then it's up to you guys to hold each other accountable, okay? So it may be, maybe you set a certain dollar amount for dining out. Well, if you know that you're keeping up to that amount and you're almost there, it is up to you to say, hey, we might want to cook at home.
Slow it down.
Instead of saying, oh, it's okay, we could just pull from this envelope. No, hold each other accountable. That is so very important. Where there is accountability, there is always going to be success.
That's right. Now listen, guys, financial conflicts are real, but they do not, I want to repeat, they do not have to be a death sentence to your marriage. But if you leave it unresolved, there are chances of it causing long-term problems in your marriage are very high. So take these steps that Ty and I have outlined for you and stave off the possibility of financial ruin by coming together, walk through these steps, get through the conflict, and come out on the other side a success story. And then you'll be able to help other people do the same. Because, guys, think about it. A lot of times what happens to us in life isn't just for us. A lot of the message that you hear right here from His and Her Money is because we walked through the fire together and we came out on the other side and we learned some things. So take the time to do the same with your marriage. Come together, figure out a plan, and resolve these financial conflicts today.
That's right, guys. Don't wait. Let's do it now. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. We want to hear from you. Leave us a comment in the comment section below letting us know your experience in these areas, okay, and these 6 steps that we just shared with you. Don't forget, we have a ton of information over at our website. All you have to do is go to hisandhermoney.com and you can stay up to date with all of your financial details, okay, guys? Also, don't forget, subscribe to our channel if you have not done so before, and also that notification bell right there next to the subscribe button. You make sure that you want to hit that. You will be notified anytime we upload a new video. Don't forget, meet us back here next Sunday night at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, where you will see the both of us sharing with you.
Well, guys, that's all for this time. It's been great. Until next time, peace.
Bye.
All right. So you heard from His and Her Money, some tips. And so very quickly before we speak with our panel, we want to go back through those tips so that you can have a small recap. So the first one is lay all your cards on the table. So making sure that you are very transparent in what all of your expenses. And it is easy to leave some out. When we were doing our budget, I remember way back when I was leaving out gas. Well, gas is a real expense, right? You have to put that in the budget. You can't leave certain pieces out that you just feel, oh, I'm going to have money for. It's important to add everything.
Yeah, the second tip they talked about was maintaining mutual respect. And I remember even in those conversations, in my mind, I knew that her purchasing gas should have been on the budget. She didn't think it should have been. If I would have been disrespectful in that conversation, it would have taken it a whole different direction. And so just being calm and maintaining mutual respect helps to get to the other side of a challenge.
Number 3 is finding the root cause of the problem. And I do a lot of work with root cause. And one of the techniques has always been to ask, it's called the 5 whys. So when you are trying to find the root cause, you ask why 5 times and try to answer to get to whatever that root cause is.
And then number 4, establish good lines of communication. And I love when they talked about when you don't communicate verbally, that's still communication, just in the wrong direction. These are tough conversations. And if you decide not to communicate about your feelings about the money or about how you're budgeting, it can leave a lot of resentment, and then that resentment turns into a lot of negative energy that comes off. Communicate about those issues. It's important to do so.
Number 5 was create a plan of attack. And so, again, it is hard to think when you're, especially when you're single, or if you're new in a marriage, to think about paying your mortgage off in 15 years, right? Because there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into making those kinds of decisions. But creating that plan of attack and really, really working that plan can definitely be helpful.
Yes, yes. And then the last step is hold each other accountable. And so once you come up with that plan, like they said in the message there, if you have a plan of attack and you notice that one person is going to Burger King a few too many times, you got the other one has to hold them accountable and say, listen, this is what we agreed to. Let's stick to our plan. Do it respectfully, but make sure to hold each other accountable.
Absolutely. So those are some of the money tips that we learned. Now we are going to introduce you to our wonderful panel. We have Mrs. Ashley Wise and Mr. Michael Childs, who are joining us. Good evening. All right.
Uh-oh. Now let's do a test. Can we hear y'all? Because I don't know if we can hear y'all. I see you talking, Ashley, but we can't hear you.
You're muted, Ashley. You're muted.
Oh, Ashley is muted. It sounds really important, Ashley, but we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Mike, are you also muted?
No, I'm here.
Yep, Mike is muted as well.
I'm here.
So we can't hear our panelists.
Let me see.
We will get them on here in just a minute. All right,
Just
Ashley, let's do another test. Here
we
you
go.
are.
Can you hear me now?
Michael? Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yay! All
Okay.
right, we're good.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're gonna be in trouble, y'all, because my better half is the tech guru, and he is not here, so we would have been in a lot of trouble. But thank you, Mike. Appreciate your help behind the scenes. But great to see you guys. How are you?
We are well. We are well. How are you? Thank you for joining us. So we have a few little questions.
Yeah, and before we dive into our questions, obviously we want to make sure that for the folks that are online, make sure to put your questions in the chat. We have some preset questions, and we'll get through as many of them as we can, but we also welcome your questions in the chat. So, we have Mr. Mike and Miss Ashley, and we want to start off by asking you both to tell us a little bit about the work you led at Faith Ministries Church using the Dave Ramsey curriculum, and share a few tips that you've taken from that curriculum that you worked with the members on. And then also talk about why that conversation was so important to you and why you decided to start that ministry. We'll start with Miss Ashley and then go to Mr. Mike.
Sounds great. Well, first of all, I want to tell you guys, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. And I want to put a disclaimer out there. I wear a lot of different hats, folks, but I don't consider myself a financial a guru necessarily. But however, I do know how to surround myself by people who know a lot more than me in this area. And I just find the talk about finances is so interesting, and it's really exciting. And so just quick backstory about how all of this started. I'm originally from Tennessee, and I grew up meager means. We weren't rich by any means. And Dave Ramsey was just happened to be a household name where we're from, because Dave is also from there as well. And not that the things that he talked about in his financial peace class are something new and it's something unheard of. It's not new. He'll tell you that himself. However, it was a household name. My parents were listening to him on the radio and trying to do some things. And as I was, I guess, a preteen, I remember my folks were just working through things. They were like, we're doing this snowball. We're trying to pay off our debt. And eventually, after a few years of that, I remember my mom was at the kitchen table and she said, guys, this is our last house note. And at that moment, I was like, what is a house note? I didn't know what that was, to be honest. And so, but they were so excited. They were like, we're paying off the house. We did it. And they were so just thrilled about that. I was excited for them. And I didn't realize what I was witnessing at that moment in my own household. So fast forward several years, my dad was like, hey, you guys need to take this class. It was the financial peace class, even before we went to college, talking about don't do credit cards and all of that. So that was like engraved in us. And so we attended, got married, and my husband is Salon. And we happened to attend the Weekend to Remember event, which I highly recommend, a few years back. And while we were there for that particular seminar, we saw the financial peace, the material there. And it reminded me that I was like, oh, yeah, I remember my folks did that. And they were super excited when they paid off the house and how exciting they were. And this stuff works. So after I saw that, we started to do the plan ourselves. Salon and I did. And because we were, had a home, had a little baby, and we were trying to work through some things. And after that, I asked Dr. Wise, just like he often says, if you have an idea about something, bring it to him. So I asked if we could have a class. And I reached out to Michael, and I knew, like I said, to surround myself with people who were in the financial world, who were the professionals, who were the experts, and to help facilitate this class along with me. And so I had the opportunity to work not only with Michael Childs, but with Kim and Corey Coker, also Lisa Williams, who's an auditor for the state, Cammie Townsend, who her area is in investments. And so we went through 4 or 5 rounds, Michael, of hosting the financial peace classes at Faith Ministries. And actually, Seneca and Carlos, you guys were part of the first round of those classes. And just to see the different families that took part in that, and to see the excitement, and to see that it worked, that these particular steps definitely worked. It was so exciting and just really thrilling. So I'll hush, Mike. Take it from there.
Well, good evening, everyone, and to Carlos and Seneca, thank you for inviting me. Uh, I guess along with that, Ash and I, we had a wonderful time working together, and by no means do I call myself a professional at all either. I've been in banking for over 30 years, and I'm still learning day to day. I still learn things, and one of the things that I learned early on in my career, I didn't know about Dave Ramsey, I didn't know about Susie Orman or anyone like that at that time, but I was working at Beneficial Finance, and this was kind of my introductory into the financial services. And what I learned at Beneficial Finance was key for me, and I still carry some of those things with me today. And just to give you an example, I was fresh out of college, but loved the job, and I made a loan to a couple who had just got married, and this couple wanted to go on a honeymoon. So I made, they qualified. We did all the debt income check ratios. We checked the credit, did all that. They qualified for the loan. It was about $1,500 or so. Made them the loan. They go on their honeymoon and they come back. The loan, mind you, is set up for like a 24-month loan, $1,500 set up for 24 payments. Well, 8 months into their marriage, they start having problems. So, and they eventually get divorced. And the husband said, that's not my loan, that's her loan. And she said, that's not my loan, that's his loan. And they both were signed on the loan. But what it taught me was that, why pay for a vacation and go have fun and come back and then pay for something when you've already had all the fun? If they had just planned and put together a budget, they could have saved for that, saved that money and gone on vacation and came back and not have any debt. And what happened was they ended up getting sued over $1,500 just because they didn't have a financial plan in place. And as a young man, it taught me a lot. I thought to myself, I hope that I never, take out a loan to go on vacation. There's good money, there's bad money. There's good money, there's bad money. And in this case, that wasn't a good use of the money.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a good point. And you bring up a good point, because and not only the $1,500 is not $1,500 once you pay it off in 24 months. And so that is another piece that people need to think about. So that is a great example of really thinking about wanting things right now, or creating a plan so that you can have it but not have to continue to pay for it. So that's good. I know you want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I was thinking, because I remember being y'all's first class with Ashley and Mike, and I remember some of the things that Dave Ramsey shared. I remember going home with Seneca and like, we're not going to be able to do that one. Like he suggested, like, getting rid of your credit cards. We were like, we ain't going to be able to do that one. But a lot of the stuff in there, if there were 10 tips, we probably took 7 of them. There were definitely nuggets in there that we were able to use that applied to our lives that helped things become better. And just like Mike's example, and what Seneca just said, you use $1,500 to go on vacation. By the time you really pay that thing off, it's going to be almost double. So was it really worth it versus if you would have saved up on the front end and then went on vacation? So I'll stop talking. Go ahead and ask your second question because I can go on all day. This is my kind of topic right here.
Right.
Yes, it is. So so we watched the video, and so what are your reactions? What did you lean into, or what of those 6 tips did you find most interesting? So again, we just want to get your reactions, and we'll start with Michael first, and then Ashley.
So, it was a great video, great tips. Laying your cards on the table, being transparent, being open, being honest about everything, is a great tip. Including your spouse in all decisions and being mutually respectful to each other. All of these are great tips. And then the communication piece, you can put communication with almost any other subject matter, and you got to be able to communicate and communicate effectively to be successful. But one of the things that I keyed in on is when they talked about creating a plan of attack. And that's what you literally have to do. You have to create a plan of attack. And to give you an example, if you're going to live in Columbus and you want to go to Los Angeles, California, for example, so you're going to fly a plane to Los Angeles, California. That pilot is going to get into the plane, the pilot and the co-pilot. They're going to put the coordinates in. They're going to plan how they're going to get you to California. And you go up in the air, and 4 or 5 hours later, you're in California. They had a plan of attack. You take that same pilot and that same co-pilot, and let's say you don't have a plan. And that pilot says, well, I know California's on the West Coast, so we're going to head that way. And don't put in no coordinates. Well, let's say he's close and he's pointing in the right direction, but he's just 3 centimeters off. Well, by the time you get there, you may end up in Seattle, Washington, and not California, just by being off that little bit because you didn't have a plan of attack. So it's important. If you don't have a plan, you're going to end up somewhere, but it may not be where you want to be. So you have to have a plan of attack. And then the last one I'll talk about is being accountable. It certainly is important. You do have to be accountable to one another. And for my wife and I, we've been married a while, and so I know the things that she likes. She knows the things that I like. She going out to dinner, going to movies, or whatever. So we've kind of built that into our budget. So we don't verbally have to say, hey, if we're out to dinner and Marcia wants to get filet mignon, I don't want to have to lean over and say, hey, maybe you should get the Angus burger instead. So, because that could create a problem. So we have it built into our budget. Do we go out to dinner every night? No. But when we go, it's built into our budget, and we go and we have a good time. So with that accountability, you do have to be careful with that one, because in a marriage, you want to have a solid foundation in finance, but you don't want to tear down your marriage in the process. So I just say, be careful when you're talking about accountability.
Yes,
right. That is true.
Yes. And Mike, I completely agree. Everything you just said, it was spot on. All the things that I would have said myself. I really enjoyed the video, and the accountability. Yes, that's huge. And when it comes to planning things out and trying your best, whatever your situation may be, because everybody's situation is a little bit different. So take your situation and plan it out, and how and spend it on paper first. And as you're spending it on paper, then you can begin to see, okay, this is where this is going, and this is where that is going. So the coordinates example that you gave, Mike, was great. I love that. And one example that I gave, or a story that I love to share that really sticks with me, is there's an envelope system too, is where, that's one of the keys that we learned throughout our process, is having envelopes when you set your budget, and X amount goes towards those groceries, X amount for restaurants, or whatever the case may be. And when we were trying to plan our work, our plan of attack, I remember we had X amount for restaurant for that particular month. And I remember, in regards to accountability, the wonderful Johnson family, Reverend Jason Johnson and Brandale, they said, hey, it was after church one Sunday, and they said, y'all want to join us for lunch? And I was like, sure. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, let me go check what the envelope says at that moment. And I checked with the envelope, and in that moment I checked it. I was like, you know what? The envelope says no. So I'll be honest, and I had to tell Jason, I said, the envelope says no. And they took part in our class too. Now, I shouldn't say our class, it was the class. So they took part in the class, and it was a mutual understanding. They said, you know what? Don't worry, we understand. And so it was without any hard feelings or anything, that it was like, no, we're not able to do that this particular time, because the envelope said whatever, because we had plans and we were trying our best to stick to the plan and to continue to keep it in action. And so that's just a reminder of accountability, and that sometimes you do have to sacrifice. You may not be able to get all of your wants right then. Sometimes it has to be delayed satisfaction, and that's okay too.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story, Ashley, because I know that Seneca and I have often, we'll sit back and we say, man, we wish we could do X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z could be a number of things. Maybe X, Y, and Z is we want to go on a cruise. And because we saw our friends go on a cruise, we want to go on a cruise. But what we often talk about is we don't know their entire bill budget portfolio. And so while we've made decisions to have investments in accounts and savings, we don't know what they're doing and why they're able to do that cruise. Right. So we can't necessarily line up with, there's that term, the Joneses, doing what the Joneses do. Yeah. We got to do what works for us. And so, obviously another hard conversation, but we work through that, and it's working better now, right? Would you say, is it better?
See?
Yeah. The wanting to do X, Y, Z is me. He is perfectly fine being at home.
I didn't say it.
However, yes, we have definitely worked through that.
That's funny.
Oh gosh.
You're not alone.
Right. Clearly, we all go through this, and it's the communication that makes it so important. And that kind of leads into the next question in terms of communication is, I want you both to think about when you both, when you married your spouses, and, going into that, did y'all have to have that conversation up front about how you were going to do your budget? Was the conversation tough up front, or was it something that you had organically once you were married? And then looking back on that, would you recommend doing that differently now that based on how things operated back then? And we'll start with Miss Ashley and then go to Mr. Mike.
Yeah, well, Salon and it was, I know everyone's story is totally different. So our story, we were college sweethearts. So after we graduated from undergrad, we had a 2-year plan. So we were engaged, and the game plan was, hey, I'm going on for graduate work, and his job was to go find a job. And so after he had graduated, and it was like, okay, if you need to move in with your folks, whatever you got to do to save some money. And so after that 2-year time of school, I graduated from graduate school. And once we got married, we had that 2-year plan, and we were trying our best to work that plan. And that's kind of been our thing throughout our marriage. And it has worked, and it's been organic in the sense that that's what we did from the very beginning. So laying our cards out on the table, of course, taking advantage when we were in school, taking advantage of scholarship opportunities and different things. That's a whole nother conversation. We can talk about that, because that's something I love to talk about too. But taking advantage of different scholarship opportunities so you can be as close to debt free after school is said and done. And knowing that if you're debt free from school, then that sets you up that much further ahead in the long run. So we are super excited, even when we have our just intentional date nights where we do sit down and talk about our budget. And even though it can be a daunting task at times, we know that that's just a part of the discussion. We have to figure out, okay, what is this month looking like? What is the game plan? And to continue to work out that plan. So planning is huge here.
So just to add on to that, I think it for us, obviously before we got married, we had two separate budgets and organically kind of merged those two budgets together. Um, didn't really have any tough conversations. I mean, it just kind of happened and it worked out for us as a young couple. And like I mentioned with the beneficial story, learning things there. And when we first got married, I had a bank account and checking and savings, but I was not the person who would balance my checkbook. So
Hmm.
I would write checks. I would write my checks and pay my bills and whatever balance I had, I believed that balance was right. And Marcia, my wife, was the one who would be sitting down, balancing her checkbook, and I said, "Why are you doing all that? You don't need to do all that." And it was through her that I kind of fell into that. Hey, this is important. If it's $100 or if it's a dime, if it's a penny, you need to be able to account for that. And so
Right.
it was through her that I kind of learned those kinds of things. And now, Ashley, you mentioned it being daunting. I love to sit down and talk about the budget. I love to work through the budget. And when there's a problem, looking for the problem and trying to
Mhm.
fix it. And I don't know if it had anything to do with all the previous things that I had to learn, but it's something that I love to do now. And
Mhm.
probably, my wife probably gets tired of hearing about it, but it's something that, I find almost kind of relaxing to do.
That's cool. That's cool.
That
That is
sounds
really good.
strikingly
Especially now,
similar.
speaking of that, Mike, there's maybe we'll get into this later on, but there's that snowball method of when you lay everything out, when you have your list of your debts. Now, I do find that very exciting when you see, oh, this whole list of stuff. Okay, and you're trying to figure out that plan of attack, and then by listing it, you're starting with the smallest debt that you may have. So you take that one and you pay that one off, and then you roll whatever you would have paid into the next largest amount, and then into the next one. And then the ball gets bigger and bigger, and you're just really attacking it with great intensity. I find that, yeah, I understand. Maybe I am yeah, I understand
Yes,
that,
you
Mike.
are. See, I can see you are excited
I
about
get
it.
excited.
And not the only one. You're excited too.
No, you're not. You're not. But
Yeah.
it is when you see your efforts and your work working, then
Hmm.
it's like, okay, okay, and we're doing this together. So it's
Right,
another form of communication and teamwork.
right.
That is true. That is
Hmm.
true. And I do love that snowball effect because it truly helped me pay off my credit card. Because you had to think
Yes.
about what you had, all of your debt, and when you do a small thing, now the credit card wasn't small, so praise the Lord, it's gone. But when you see one thing go, and you do get some satisfaction, and so I would definitely recommend those who are watching, or if you're looking for a place to start, really lay it
Mhm.
all out and see what you can tackle first.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
the key though is once you tackle that, whatever money you were paying on that, you want to move it to something else. You don't want to just say,
Mhm.
well, I have an extra, $50, $100. You want to move it to something else so that you can continue to pay that debt down. So I think I probably lean in a little bit to where you all are also
Hmm.
with
Yes.
that.
That's
Uh,
good. That's good.
so thank you for bringing that aspect up because that's a good piece of the class.
Hmm. Hmm.
So some will say that there's an aspect of marriage that is a business. What are your thoughts on this? So I will start with, let's see, Michael first, and then we'll go back to Ashley.
So, so personally, I don't put the two together. Um, I get it. I understand why someone might say that. I mean, your partner is like a business. A marriage. You're making in a business. You're making monetary decisions. You're making all these day-to-day actions, and you do that in a marriage. But again, personally, I don't put those two together. Because in a business, at the end of the day, um, if someone gets mad, they can get up and walk away and say, "I quit,"
It's
Hmm.
true.
and that's the end of it. And I know surely that could happen in a marriage, but hopefully you don't just walk away.
Mhm.
So marriage to me is, it's a holy covenant and anointed by God. And so I keep those two separate. A marriage is so much more than just managing your money. It's so much more than making joint decisions. It's so much more than all of that. So
Right.
I don't put business. My marriage is not a business. I don't look at it that way. But I get why some people would say that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely understand that too, Mike. And I look at it as, yes, marriage is a holy covenant, and but there's decisions that we are having to make, and we have, as a couple, we have to take care of business too. And like anything, if it's our car, if it's our, if it's our household, like a business, we have to maintain our marriage, and there's certain things that we have to do for upkeep. Things that we do to just attend to our marriage, and things that we have to tend to when it comes to our business as well, whether it's paying the bills, the HR end of things, the house manager, whatever that is. And because something the salon often says is you can't live on love alone, so we got to take take care of our business here. And so yes, it is separate things, but together, you guys we are trying our best with whatever means we have to take care of our business so we can set ourselves up for a better situation, not only for ourselves, but also to set up a legacy for our children as well, for the next
Absolutely.
generation. So keeping that in mind. So that's the business side of things, perhaps. I think it goes beyond just us.
Right. Right. Mike, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything else. It looked like you were leaning in, but no.
Oh, leaning in agreement. I do agree
Oh,
with that.
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
paying
I do too.
attention.
that's good.
Thanks.
You're a good student,
Did
Michael.
you have
See?
anything you wanted to add?
No, I think that was like what they both shared was amazingly accurate. I think a lot of times people will try to, change
Right.
what a marriage is, and at the end of the day, what Mike and Ashley said, it's a covenant with God. That's what it's all about. It's an agreement that we set forth. It's a three-way triangle between us two and God. And a business is different from that because, as Mike said, if you don't like your business, you can walk away. We're not walking away from this. So it's there are aspects of a business that are a part of a marriage,
Yeah.
but to make them like one and the same is, I agree, they are not one and the same.
They're
So
not.
yeah,
I agree with that.
yeah. Um, so, one of the things that Seneca and I always want to do is, obviously we're called the couples counseling, and we
Counseling
do
couple.
the counseling couple. Thank you for correcting me. Yes. And it's Thursday therapy. But we had someone at church one time say, I'm not married. Is this beneficial for me? And I love how Seneca started this off by saying, this is great for couples, but it's also for singles. And so the next question, even though it's worded for couples, I want you to kind of phrase it in a way, or respond in a way that would benefit singles and couples as you've been. But I just want to point this out that. So with the question asked, what would you advise a new couple or even a single person to consider as they think about their financial plan, either while they're still single or while they're attempting to get married to someone? What kind of things should they consider? And we'll start with Ashley and then go to Mike.
Yeah, I think if you are a single person, this is a prime opportunity where you are in the driver's seat. You have the opportunity to decide how you're going to set up your budget. And are you going to stick to that budget? And you may not have a partner necessarily as your accountability partner, but you can have a friend, or perhaps it's a parent, or just somebody that you trust, that you don't mind sharing, saying, hey, if you see me, going outside of what I said I'm going to do, tap me on the shoulder gently and remind me, or sometimes you have to yell at me to remind me that I need to stay on track, that these are my goals, and to continue to reach towards them. So in the meantime, if you are single, in my opinion, starting with the snowball, and taking your smallest debt, or ordering your debts from least to greatest, and starting to work through those, doing a zero-based budget every month, that's huge in my opinion, of where you're spending your money on paper. You're starting out with your tithe, then you're giving yourself, paying yourself for your savings, and then you're going through all of your bills that you have to pay, and if there's any extra money left over from there, then you are putting that money where it belongs, where it can best be served. Using that envelope system, that's huge. Another way too, to keep yourself accountable once you set up that your budget of what you want to do. And that some people may consider that old school, and that's okay. But that is another way for you just to keep yourself accountable for what you're doing. And once you have set yourself up and put yourself in a financial in a good position, that's preparing you for your mate as well. So hopefully your mate is doing the same thing. So then when the Lord sees for you guys to get together, you guys can start on a great fresh start, and hopefully not have some of the looming things that is so often that happens within so many couples of where we're starting off in debt. And you can actually start off, on a fresh, clean sheet, or at least a cleaner sheet than normal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would add to that, being be it single or being married, I think you should think about the things that are important to you financially. I think you need to think about what are your goals and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And then, as Ashley mentioned, you have to have a budget. I think you have to build your financial budget. And I like to call our budget a happy budget, because my wife and I, we both go to work every day. We both deal with all the pressures and anxiety of work every day. So we should be able to reward ourselves with,
Mhm.
some of the money that we make. So build a happy budget. Don't make it so restrictive that you can't do anything. So, if you're in a lot of debt, you got to start somewhere. And if you're in a lot of debt, it may take you longer, but still build that budget where you can be happy with it and enjoy life. And I
Hmm.
think that if you do that, that'll set you on a good path. It's sort of like building that budget, but and within that, make sure you have life insurance. I think that's one of the things that a
Mm,
lot of people,
yes.
particularly African Americans, we don't include in our budget. So make sure you put life insurance in your budget. But it's like the bricklayer. Bricklayer is going to build a house, but the first thing that bricklayer does is lay a foundation. Nothing goes up above the ground until the foundation is laid. And once you get a good foundation laid, then all the other things can go into play. Life happens, you get married, you might have kids, you're going to need a new car, you might have debt. So different things happen, but if you have a,
Hmm.
a, a budget, a foundation that's built in a way that can absorb some of those things, to go a long way. And, if there's a crack in the foundation, hopefully that would never happen in nobody's house. But if you get a crack in your foundation, you need to go get it fixed immediately. You can't wait and hope that crack goes away, right?
Yeah.
So if you build a budget, that a strong foundation in your budget, if there's a crack in it, if it's not working, it's your budget. Go in and fix the budget, tweak it,
Hmm.
make it work for you. Nobody else has
Yeah.
to see your budget. It's your budget, and so just make it work for you. I always like to say, a good budget reduces money related anxiety,
Mm.
right? So you have anxiety and you have discipline, and those are two opposing forces. So if you're disciplined in managing your budget, anxiety goes down. If you're intentional about what you do, confusion goes away. But
Hmm.
if you don't have a budget, you have nowhere to start. So I would say put together a plan, stick to the plan, and things will be okay.
Hmm. Now that's some good stuff. That's some real good stuff, Michael. And something else that you mentioned, it reminded me about the life insurance and the emergency fund. We know there's going to be some rainy days, and by no
Mhm.
means we are not perfect at all. So I don't want to ever come across like that. But it is having that emergency fund when you know there's going to be some things that come up. All the things that
Mhm.
you listed, Michael, and some stuff that just comes out of nowhere because life throws so many curveballs. We want to make sure that we are best prepared to be able to handle those curveballs as possible. So we're not making rash decisions in the heat of the moment. It's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We're going to, do something that is irrational. That if we had had the emergency fund there, we could have made a calmer decision and at the
Mhm.
moment, when we needed to do that. And that's huge. And I just appreciate having this opportunity just to have this conversation, because so oftentimes we're not talking about it. If households are not talking about these things, or if it's not happening in the classrooms at school, where do we expect for children and for all adults alike, to gain the knowledge and to be economically sound as possible.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've given a lot of good nuggets, great nuggets actually, and really helped us to be thoughtful and to have a real conversation about money because you mentioned being intentional, and a lot of what you're saying is also living within your means. A lot of times we want what we want right now, and we want to have all of these things, but at the end of the day, we do want to reduce that anxiety, right? We don't want to have all these things and then we're trying to figure out how we take care of what we need to take care of. And so I just appreciate, what you've been sharing with us.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Okay.
You can ask
Okay.
you.
And so the last question, as we are going to wrap up here in just a few minutes, is really an easy one. Are there any last words of advice or anything that you want to share with our viewers this evening?
You want to take it
And
first, Mike?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Um, I would say always remember that there's good debt and there's bad debt, and you should try to distinguish the two. And then you have to start somewhere, because if you don't start somewhere, you're going nowhere. So
Mhm.
whether if you're in a good position, bad position, or otherwise, you have to start somewhere. And if you don't do that, who knows where you're going to end up, and it likely won't be where you want to be.
Mhm.
that's true.
That was
That's
very
true.
eloquently said, Michael. So you're making me look bad. But I love that. You're right. You have to start somewhere. And if nothing else, like I said, I am nowhere. I am not the professional. I am not the expert. I'm just a regular old person here who is just trying to take the lessons that I've grown up with and to apply them for my life and to allow my children to see some example to set them up for a better position than I was in, and so forth. And knowing that you have to start somewhere, and then wherever you are starting, be encouraged. You may have a meager, very meager budget, and that's okay. And that knowing that with hard work and with being intentional with that and working, having a plan and being willing to work that plan and to have delayed satisfaction, gratification, to be able to sacrifice, to know that sometimes you may not get everything that you want right away, but you can keep dreaming and reaching towards those goals that you can definitely get them with the good Lord's help.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Love those tips. I want to reflect back on something y'all said too in terms of having an accountability partner. Um, so often we're trying to figure this thing about life out by ourselves. And, I feel like obviously we're married, so she's my accountability partner, right? But like if you're single, as you said, Ashley, go and find somebody you trust, your parents, find someone that you can talk to. And it's not that you have to take their advice, but what you can do is take what they're telling you and take elements of it and apply it to your life. Or choose to take all of it or none of it, but at least you have an option and at least you were aware versus not knowing at all. So I love having an accountability partner. And then also I love how y'all said to make sure you know what you want to accomplish. If you have a big goal of paying your house off, and like Mike, like you said, Mike, you don't want to make it so restrictive where you can't have fun, but you also want to keep those goals in mind and then put some money away to be able to have that fun, but then have that big goal in mind. So I love the tips you all gave. And one of the tips I wanted to talk about was it really goes back to that snowball. Because right, like Cindy said about her credit cards, there you pay off the little stuff, you take that money, you apply it to something else. That snowball really works. And one of the things that we found ourselves in during the pandemic was an opportunity to have our home refinanced. And because we decided to refinance the loan because interest rates went down so incredibly low, we were able to save a significant amount of money on our mortgage every month. And we decided to use that money for the purpose of a snowball. And we've been knocking stuff off. And I remember the first thing we knocked off, I showed Cindy and I was like, look, we paid it off. And we were like, wow, it
Right.
was like really exciting.
Yeah.
Like it was like we had this mini party. Like, wow, we paid it off, and
Yes.
then we went to the next. So like we're like, okay, a year from now we're going to have these two things paid off, and it's like, yeah, that's like really amazing. Like it's
Yeah.
really exciting. It's like the small things,
Yes.
but it's really big things because to what
Yes.
Mike was saying earlier, it takes that anxiety down.
Mhm.
That if we still had that debt, it would create more potential tension in the house. And so when you have debt issues and then you have other issues, it can make things really difficult. Things are going to come up. But when you have debt on top of those things that come up, it makes it very difficult. We still have
Mhm.
things, but we don't have debt to also go on top of those things. So we're able to deal with those struggles easier than if we also had the debt.
I don't know what he's talking about. I'm perfect.
Yeah. Well,
That
it sounds like to me that I'm not the only one who enjoys doing and working with the budget. It sounds like you all as well enjoy it.
oh yeah, you
Yeah.
give me an Excel spreadsheet, I'm
Oh,
on
wait.
that joker all day.
Lord, pen and paper, pen and paper.
I'm a pen and paper girl also. So.
Me too. Me too. See all these high
But,
tech folks, you know.
yes. We say all that to say, and I'm happy that we're able to be here and to have this conversation together. And we are laughing and we're able to really, give some good tips. But again, if you're watching, just know everyone started somewhere,
Mhm,
right? We
mhm.
all started somewhere. And I remember I, would see some of our friends who were financially in different places than we are. And sometimes when you're in that space, you're like, oh my goodness. Not that you want to compare yourself, but you see it and you're like, oh, but I want to have that right now. I want to drive that car. But it's not about things. It really is about being intentional about what is important, as you heard, having your accountability partner, creating that plan of attack and working that plan,
Mhm.
and knowing that even if you don't get everything you want today, this moment, you can work to get what you need to get. So hopefully you were able to take some tips from our panel here. They say they're not experts, but they gave us some nuggets tonight.
Mhm.
But thank you for being here with us, Michael and Ashley. Again, we always like to say thank you to Dr. and Dr. Wise for making mental health, because we know that anxiety is a real thing and finances can create an anxiety. So for making mental health a priority, thank you, Michael McKee, who's in the background with all the pretty festive screens here. Thank you. And we thank you, the viewing audience, for being here with us this evening. One last thing.
Yes. As we were kind of prepping to get this thing together, we were talking amongst the five of us, and we were discussing, could we do what Mike and Ashley used to do face to face? Could we do that virtually? And we said, why not? Let's try it. So, folks that are on the call right now, if you have an interest in joining us for a potential virtual financial planning session, we want you to go to faithministries.church/connect and share that interest there. And honestly, what I'll say is that it could be the version that Mike and Ashley led before, which was kind of that baseline curriculum they provided. But then there's another level to it. And I mean, Ashley and I have talked about this. There's the investment side of it, that maybe we want to have a conversation about investments. There are other things that we can talk about, but these are ways that we can make sure we're putting that 10% towards our tithes, 10% towards savings, and then making sure that we pay ourselves and make sure we get those things done. So if there's an interest, faithministries.church/connect, share your interest there. We'll capture the information, and we may have information down the road about coming together virtually to talk about financial planning in the future.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy. Yes. And just thank you guys for this opportunity to just share on this evening. Thank you for reaching out, and just for all of us to remind ourselves and to so we can learn some skills, so we can be better stewards of the finances that we do have, so we can best use it. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Amen.
And with that, we will say good evening. And Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
Happy Holidays,
Merry-
all of those things, right? They are
Yes.
coming.
Yes.
Good evening.
That's a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you.
Yep, thank you.